That thing you forgot to reply to this morning, the email you opened, half read, and then moved on from, is still running in the back of your mind right now. You can feel it. A low hum of unfinished business sitting behind whatever else you are trying to focus on. And it is not just that email. It is the report you started but did not finish. The conversation you need to have but keep postponing. The project that is 90% done but somehow never gets closed. Your brain is not bad at letting go. It is engineered to hold on. And that engineering has a name, a mechanism, and, once you understand it, a way to make it work for you instead of against you. Julian was a strategy director at a mid-size consulting firm. 42 years old, sharp, well-regarded by clients. But he had developed a habit that was quietly wrecking his evenings. Every night around 8, sometimes later, he would pick up his phone and open his task manager. Not to work, just to look. He would scroll through incomplete items, mentally rehearsing what he had not done, then put the phone down feeling worse than before. His partner started calling it the doom scroll. Julian did not understand why he could not stop. He had no intention of doing work at that hour. He was not behind on any deadline. And yet the pull toward those unfinished tasks was almost physical. Julian was not being neurotic. He was experiencing something that has been studied for nearly 100 years, and it was consuming his mental bandwidth without his permission. Here is the thing most people get wrong about unfinished tasks. They think the stress comes from the tasks themselves, from the volume, the difficulty, the deadline pressure. But the stress is not about the task. It is about the incompleteness. Your brain treats an unfinished task differently from a finished one. Not slightly differently, fundamentally differently. A completed task gets filed away. An incomplete task stays active, looping, nagging, consuming resources in the background like a browser tab you forgot to close. And this is not a metaphor. There is a measurable cognitive cost to every open loop in your head. The more unfinished commitments you carry, the less working memory you have available for the thing you are actually trying to do right now. But here is where this gets genuinely surprising. The solution is not what you think. It is not about finishing everything. There is a specific mental trick discovered by researchers about a decade ago that shuts down the loop without completing the task at all. We will get to that in the framework. The science behind this starts with a psychologist named Bluma Zeigarnik. In 1927, Zeigarnik was a student of the legendary Kurt Lewin at the University of Berlin. The story goes that Lewin noticed something odd while sitting in a Viennese cafe. Their waiter could remember every detail of open orders, who ordered what, at which table, with which modifications. But the moment a bill was paid and the table cleared, the waiter could not recall a single item from that order. The completed transaction vanished from memory. The open ones stayed razor sharp. Zeigarnik designed an experiment to test this. She gave 164 participants a series of 18 to 22 tasks, puzzles, arithmetic problems, small assembly projects. Half the tasks were interrupted before completion. When she tested recall afterward, participants remembered the interrupted tasks about 90% better than the ones they had completed. 90%. The unfinished tasks were not just lingering. They were dominating working memory. She published the results in Psychologische Forschung, and the phenomenon became known as the Zeigarnik Effect. This is exactly what was happening to Julian. Every incomplete task on his list was an open order in his mental cafe, staying active, staying sharp, demanding cognitive resources long after he had stopped working for the day. The second piece of research comes from Maria Ovsiankina, another student of Kurt Lewin, working around the same time. In 1928, Ovsiankina ran a complementary experiment. She presented participants with various tasks and interrupted them midway. Then she gave them free time. No instructions, no prompts. What she found was striking. Approximately 67% of participants spontaneously returned to the interrupted tasks without being asked. Nobody told them to go back. Nobody rewarded them for finishing. They just felt compelled to resume. Ovsiankina called this a quasi-need, a psychological tension created by incompleteness that drives you back toward the unfinished action. It is not rational. It is not productive. It is automatic. And here is why this matters for your daily life. Every task you start and do not finish creates one of these quasi-needs. Every email you open and do not reply to. Every document you begin editing and leave half done. Each one generates its own gravitational pull on your attention. Stack enough of them, and you are not choosing what to focus on anymore. Your open loops are choosing for you. Now here is the finding I hinted at earlier, the one that changes everything. In 2011, E.J. Masicampo and Roy Baumeister at Florida State University ran a series of experiments that challenged the core assumption of the Zeigarnik Effect. Everyone had assumed that the only way to stop an unfinished task from hijacking your mind was to actually finish it. Masicampo and Baumeister proved that wrong. In their studies, they gave participants unfulfilled goals and measured the cognitive interference, intrusive thoughts during unrelated tasks, poor performance on anagram puzzles, high mental accessibility of goal-related words. The interference was real and measurable. But then they had one group of participants make a specific, concrete plan for when and how they would complete the goal. Not do the task, just plan it. The result was remarkable. The group that made concrete plans showed no more cognitive interference than the group that had actually completed the task. Their brains treated the plan as a form of completion. The loop closed, not because the work was done, but because the brain had a credible commitment that it would get done. Masicampo and Baumeister published this in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, and it fundamentally reframed how we think about the Zeigarnik Effect. The open loop does not need resolution. It needs a plan. So what do you actually do with this? Here are 4 steps to stop unfinished tasks from draining your cognitive resources, without needing to finish everything on your list. Step 1. Identify your open loops. Most people have no idea how many unfinished commitments are running in the background of their mind. They feel the weight, but have never counted the sources. Before you can close loops, you need to see them. Take 15 minutes, not more, and write down every single thing that feels incomplete. Not just work tasks, personal commitments too. The text you have not replied to. The appointment you keep meaning to book, the conversation you have been avoiding. Renata, a financial analyst at an asset management firm, did this exercise on a Saturday morning. She expected to list maybe 15 items. She stopped at 43. She had been carrying 43 open loops without realizing it. Some were months old. A few were trivially small. A library book she needed to return, a subscription she meant to cancel. But each one had been silently consuming a sliver of her mental bandwidth. She described the feeling of seeing them all on paper as physically lighter, not because anything was done, but because the inventory itself moved the loops from implicit background noise to explicit visible commitments. Step 2. Assign each loop a next action and a when. This is the Masicampo principle in practice. Your brain does not need the task finished. It needs a credible plan. And a credible plan requires two things: what specifically you will do next, and when you will do it. Not work on the proposal, but draft the executive summary of the proposal, Tuesday from 9 to 10:30. Not deal with the tax situation, but call the accountant on Wednesday at 2. The more specific the commitment, the more effectively it shuts down the cognitive loop. Tomas, a product director at a health tech startup, started applying this to his weekly review. Every Friday afternoon, he would look at his open items and assign each one a concrete next action with a specific time block for the following week. He noticed something within the first 2 weeks: his Sunday night anxiety. The dread he had felt every week for years dropped dramatically. His task list had not changed. His workload had not decreased. But his brain had stopped rehearsing unfinished business because every item had a plan attached to it. And here is the step most people skip, the one that actually changes everything. Step 3. Kill the loops that do not matter. Not every open loop deserves a plan. Some deserve to be deleted. The Zeigarnik Effect does not distinguish between important unfinished tasks and trivial ones. Your brain will hold on to a half-read article about kitchen renovation with the same tenacity it holds onto a critical client deliverable. The cognitive cost is disproportionate to the actual importance. So why does nobody talk about this? Because actively deciding not to do something feels like failure. It requires you to look at a commitment and say, "This is not going to happen, and I am choosing that deliberately." Layla, a creative director at a branding agency, had been carrying a loop about learning Italian for over 2 years. She had downloaded the app, done 3 lessons, and stopped. Every time she saw the app icon on her phone, it triggered a micro-pulse of guilt. When she finally deleted the app and explicitly told herself she was not learning Italian this year, she described the relief as absurd, out of proportion with how small the commitment was. But that is exactly the point. Small, abandoned commitments create the same cognitive overhead as large ones. Clearing them is not giving up. It is choosing where your limited mental resources actually go. Step 4. Build a closing ritual. This is the one that ties everything together. Zeigarnik showed that open loops persist. Ovsiankina showed that your brain will drag you back to them involuntarily. Masicampo showed that plans can shut them down. But plans decay. New loops open every day. If you do not have a consistent practice for processing your open loops, they accumulate silently until you are back where you started, carrying 40 items you cannot stop thinking about. A closing ritual is a 5 to 10-minute routine at the end of each workday. You review what is open, assign next actions to anything new, and, this is the critical part, write down where you will pick up tomorrow. Not a vague intention. A specific sentence. Tomorrow I start with the Q3 revenue section of the board deck, picking up from the competitive analysis paragraph. That sentence is the plan your brain needs to release the loop. Deepak, a senior engineering manager at an infrastructure company, built this into his last 10 minutes of every workday. He calls it his shutdown sequence. He reviews open tasks, writes one sentence about where he will start the next morning, and then closes his laptop. He told his team the difference was noticeable within a week. He stopped checking Slack after dinner, stopped mentally rehearsing code reviews in the shower, and started sleeping better. His actual output did not change. His ability to stop working when he stopped working changed completely. Now you might be thinking, this sounds like yet another productivity system. Another set of rituals to layer on top of an already overloaded day. And that is a fair objection. But here is the difference. This is not about doing more. This is about thinking less. Specifically, about stopping your brain from running background processes on tasks you are not actively working on. The closing ritual takes 5 minutes. The cognitive cost of not doing it runs for hours every evening, every weekend, every vacation where you cannot stop thinking about work. The second objection is more practical. I have too many open loops to process. If I tried to list them all, I would never finish. Probably true the first time. Renata's list of 43 took her 30 minutes, not 15. But that is a one-time cost. After the initial purge, the daily maintenance is trivial. You are only processing the new loops that opened that day. 5 items, maybe 8. The system compounds. The first week feels like effort. The third week feels like relief. By the second month, you cannot imagine going back. Remember Julian? The strategy director who could not stop doom scrolling his task manager every evening? He started with step 1. He listed his open loops and counted 31. Then he went through step 3 and killed 9 of them outright. Commitments he had been carrying for months that he was never going to fulfill. That alone felt significant. But the real change came from step 4. He built a 3-minute closing ritual at the end of each workday. He would review his open items, write down exactly where he would start the next morning, and then close his laptop. The evening doom scrolling stopped within a week. Not because he forced himself to put the phone down, but because his brain had stopped generating the pull toward unfinished tasks. The loops were closed, not by finishing everything, but by giving each open item a plan or a deliberate cancellation. His partner noticed before he did. She said he seemed present again. Your brain is not broken for fixating on unfinished tasks. It is doing exactly what 100 years of research says it should do. The Zeigarnik Effect is not a flaw. It is a feature. One that evolved to keep important actions in memory until they are resolved. The problem is that modern work creates more open loops than your working memory was ever designed to handle. The fix is not to finish everything. It is to plan everything, or consciously decide not to. That distinction is the entire game. Here is what you can do right now. Take 5 minutes and write down every unfinished task that is nagging at you. Just the list. You do not have to act on anything today. But getting it out of your head and onto paper is the first step to closing the loops that are silently draining your focus. In the next video, we are going to look at something called attention residue. The reason switching between tasks makes you measurably worse at all of them, even when you think you are multitasking efficiently. If you have ever finished a busy day feeling like you worked hard but accomplished nothing, that is exactly what we will be breaking down. If this helped you understand why your brain will not let go, subscribe. We put out a new video every week on the science behind how high performers actually think.